And hello to and welcome to another episode of the Motor City Metrics podcast here at TigersMLReport.com. I am Rogelio Castillo. Alongside me is Uper and Chris. And you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, where you listen to the podcast. And just another frigid evening here in the Motor City. It's a nice, balmy 18 degrees here. This is your weather report for anybody that's not listening in the Midwest area. So, of course, it's December. It's cold, and it is a little unusual, though, because simply it's just been last couple mild winters. And so our friends over in Erie have been getting pounded by the snow, absolutely pounded by the snow. I'm not sure about your end, Uper, in Iowa, but
no snow, just very cold here. But my mom is buried in snow up in Keweenaw County in Michigan, the UP.
And that's just, it's just, I know there was some lake effect that came in. And Chris, you got hit pretty decently out your way, right?
Well, we ended up, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 inches of snow, but tons of wind and cold, and they called off school today, I guess, because of icy conditions on the back roads. So that's 2 snow days already in the last 2 weeks. So I don't know, but it's nice and warm inside, and especially with that hot stove heating up the entire house.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go.
Takeaway, master.
Not really. So.
That's a good segue. And of course, if you feel like donating to the website, there is a link, because spring training is not too far away if you really think about it in the grand scheme of things. As we are, I don't want to say halfway point through the midway season. I think it's like under 92 days before spring training starts or something like that. So there's a link right there, PayPal, all that jazz right there. And don't forget to subscribe. Detroit Degenerate is rubbing it in my face right now. Down in the Florida Keys, warm and sunny here. Well, good for you, sir. No, just joking. That sounded like bitter, but so a lot to get. What's up, Chris? Go ahead.
Oh no, I said nice. Down in Florida Keys, it's I'm not the world's biggest Florida fan, but I wouldn't mind being there right now.
Yeah, no, especially same here. I'm not gonna lie. But so speaking of the I tried to segue that and I failed. That was a field on the handoff there. So the Tigers have done one thing. They signed Alex Cobb to a 1-year, $15 million deal. And so the Tigers have been there's in terms of hot stove activity. Of course, there's the Juan Soto. We'll get to the Juan Soto signing. I do want to address some of the Juan Soto fans out there. Some of the videos of him leaving, some of Yankee fans have been, some of the videos I've seen online have been just pure comedy. Just how mad they are at Juan Soto. And, the Bruins and Pistons both lost tonight, so I totally forgot about that too. So, the Lions are definitely, sorry, Uber. I mean, I know they beat the Packers last week, but the Packers are also, to be fair, injury-ridden as well. So the Lions at this point, Lions barely have a defense at this point. But so Cobb talked to the press today. There was a press conference at 3:00, but I was in the middle of another project at work, and so, but nevertheless, he did talk to me about some of the things that he liked about why he came to Detroit, and there's some really good quotes there. And to me, it's the Tigers. The one thing that surprised me about this move, it was afterwards they said that they were pretty much done with picking up starting pitching, and so that kind of surprised me a little bit, because I thought that the Tigers would, with all the injuries that happened last year, at least get another starter in the mix. But with Walker Buehler, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, you would have to give up draft picks for that, or no?
Not Buehler. He didn't get a qualifying offer.
Okay.
But it seems like, well, I mean, one of the things we've seen so far this offseason is pitching is very expensive.
Yeah.
Now, it's just more expensive than people expected, right? We talked about like Matthew Boyd getting 2 years and $29 million. And I went through and I looked at every starting pitcher that's signed, and it actually works out to $8.5 million per projected WAR, like Fangraphs, which is about what they say, it costs. But it felt like that was never quite true. It felt like you could get these guys like Cobb in the past for 6, 8, 10 million tops. But now, players are going for 15. It could be 17 million if he does 150 innings, and that would, and he's projected for 2 WAR, so that would be exactly 8.5 million. So, it's just expensive, and I think that's the thing with Buehler, is that he probably wants 24, 25 million for 1 year or a longer deal.
Yeah, there's no doubt. When I saw the number 15 million, it hit me like, wow, that's a lot of money. But at the same time, given where Detroit's payroll is and with the way the market is kind of red hot for pitchers, I think it's just fine. I mean, it certainly doesn't set the team back in any stretch. They can still afford whatever they want to afford. And, good for him to pocket that money. And yeah, the Matt Boyd thing should have been the clue of where this thing, how hot it was going to get.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that, like, you look at, for example, that I like what Harris said, that, everybody has a chance to get Sasaki. And it's right. I mean, as simple as that. I mean, Roki, it's funny because everybody's just like, even the White Sox had a presentation for Roki, and it was the White Sox, by the way, did make out like bandits against the trade with Boston. So we'll get to that a little later, because I really like the trade for Chicago. But it is a, Cobb 1 year, 15 million. You kind of like, you raise your eyebrow a little bit because of his age, his injury. But I did like what he said here to press today. Quote, I think what we all saw, Flaherty had a couple struggling years in previous seasons, obviously figured out something here, and it was very impressive throughout the regular season and postseason. And you can read the rest of the quote here. So he knows what the Tigers are capable of and what they can do to resurrect his career. And so, I mean, if he goes out and gives them 125, 130 innings, and I mean, if you think about it now, I mean, if you think about that 20, like even as far as back as 10 years ago, that seems like a 4th or 5th starter kind of type of innings. Now it's like 3 or number 2, number 3 inning type innings, which is just strange to think to me. And Nelton is frustrated, and there's a lot of fans frustrated too. And I think that you have every right to be, because at the same time, the Tigers have been. You saw with the Rule 5 draft too, which they lost Hicks and Gage Workman. I know some people are like, it's not that big of a deal, and it really isn't in the grand scheme of things. Workman was kind of a surprise a little bit, because you don't expect them. Workman has the ability defensively to stick to a roster. Hicks, I'm not sure what the Marlins blew me away. The Marlins were that high on him, but anyway, either way, I was more concerned about a little bit with that, but too, the Cobb signing's fine. The Cobb's, it just gives them another back end starter to really just solidify a rotation that needed another pitcher, and so. You just hope that as the winter meetings conclude today, the Tigers are not done.
It was really cool when you look at those quotes from Cobb. You think back to Scott Harris's first press conference, right? Back in the day when he talked about wanting to make the Tigers organization a place where people can see they can come and get better. And that's pretty much exactly where he was going with what he talked about Flaherty and, why it was a good landing spot for him. So that was very interesting to me. And, at this point in his career, coming off an injury-plagued year, he's going to need a place where he feels comfortable that they can get him in a good place mechanically and take care of him and milk him through the season, And if they can, you look at – I tried just looking at everything from this decade, right, from 2020 on. He had a couple of years there where he's been a 2.8 B WAR and ERA in the high 3s, got around 150 innings 1 year. He is 37, and that you always raise an eyebrow, but why can't he put up, as you mentioned, around 130 innings with a high 3s ERA? And that's going to be very, it's certainly more than he got out of Kenta Maeda last year.
Yeah, it's not a signing that really moves the needle for anybody, I don't think, but it was. We always say you can't have as much too much pitching, and this is a guy who is an established veteran. He brings a veteran presence to that rotation beyond Skubal and Maeda there, and yeah, I think they may have headed into the offseason thinking they would get 1 or 2 starting pitchers, and the prices just moved them off that, because I'm sure they want to address other areas too. But they do really they honestly, and who knows, they could suffer 10 different maladies. But they do have plenty of bodies for starting pitching now. Even beyond Mize and Manning and Maeda and Madden, you've got Herter and Montero and Job, and then Sawyer Gibson-Long will be coming back at some point later in the year. And theoretically, they have a couple more guys in the minors who could come up. So they have the bodies to choose from there. And if they aren't going to be in the market for a top-tier starter like a Corbin Burns or Max Fried or Snell, then they just wanted to add to their depth, I guess. And Cobb offers them, the chance to have an above average ERA and an average amount of innings, and that's fine. It's just not exciting.
And I agree with YouTube user here. Making the playoffs last season doesn't make this team close. Still think that. The Twins having one of the most epic collapses of all time helps with that. And I think go ahead, Chris.
Well, so, you could say that the Tigers apparently feel that way too, and that's why they're operating the way they are. They're not operating like it's time to go all in. You can say, yeah, they don't feel like they're particularly close, but they want to give themselves another chance to kind of, if not, replicate that once in a generation sort of season last year, but at least be competitive again. And that's what these kind of small fry moves indicate. At the same time, it's December. Like you said, spring training is somewhat close, but it's really, there's still plenty of offseason left and still a lot of free agents out there. So, we can't really close the book on anything. And I understand people, hoping for a bigger splash during the winter meetings, but there's nothing that says something might come down in the next 2-3 days or tonight even.
Yeah. We tend to go for an hour 10 sometimes. So, it is 9:19 and on the Eastern Coast time. So you're looking at just a little bit after 8:00 in Dallas. So where the winter meetings are. So anything is possible, but again, are they still in play for Walker Buehler? I don't know. It is very from what the sources I do have that are usually reliable say that it's kind of really super quiet. So the Tigers, that's the way they are. The Tigers are very convert. That's the way they operate, and that's the right. And however, the one thing that I have noticed, and this is highly unusual for this time of year, is the lack of minor league free agents signings. Usually by now the Tigers are a little bit active in that market. Maybe they're waiting for some players to be released or something, but by now you see the Tigers usually trying to, they flip catchers or whatever the case may be. But that has actually surprised me a little bit. I know that's like a little minor thing, but it is kind of something worth mentioning that it seems like on all front. Outside of they signed that former Yankee or Jamil, was it Jamil?
Oh, John Mike Jones.
Yeah,
Jones. Yeah.
That's really about it.
Yeah, they typically add, and then a lot of times those bodies come at the right before spring training, where people are holding out hope for a big league deal, and then I'll take a invite to spring training with a chance to make the roster or something like that. I'm sure we'll see more small minor league sightings in a couple of weeks, but what's that?
Last year, Ryan Valade was 2 days before, wasn't he? Really close to start, I thought.
Yeah, I don't remember when they got Valade, but it's that happens. Some guys get cut loose, and that happens towards the end of spring training too, right? This is somebody doesn't make another team's roster, and he's a guy that you want to take a chance on. I'm trying to think. I guess they got Tyler Holton around this time. I think 3 years ago, two years ago. Feels like it when they just picked him up off waivers. I don't know. Yeah, like you said, it's just been quiet in general. I don't think it's going to stay this quiet. I'm sure that they're going to make a couple more moves. We talked about it before the show, but somebody had linked them to Kirby Yates, the closer. He's another older guy, but he's coming off like a career year, which was buoyed by a fair amount of luck. But there's still a lot of strikeouts there, which the Tigers don't have. And he's a legitimate closing experience with the Tigers have with Jason Foley, I guess, and Alex Lang when he comes back healthy. But it's still, I don't think that Foley was ever ideal for that role, just because he's not a bat messer. I think Hinch always loved to use him in that role as the guy to come in and get that ground ball when you need it, and he just kind of ended up in the closer role because that was who was most effective at that point. Now, by the end of the year, the most effective relievers were Brisky and Vest, really. And they could compete for a closer spot too. But it wouldn't shock me if the Tigers are aiming for at least one high strikeout reliever this offseason.
I like Kirby Yates. He's obviously had a couple arm issues in the last few years, but when he's healthy, the guy's solid. He throws a lot of strikes, misses bats, as you said. And, I happened to watch him quite a few times last year because, again, boring fantasy reasons, but still, that's why I watched. And he's 37, just like Cobb, so he'd be cornering the market on the 37-year-olds.
Yeah.
Go for the bets.
Well, yeah, and those, the people talking about, Paul Goldschmidt, maybe it's like, well, all right, another 37-year-old. They're young men compared to me, but that's pretty old in baseball years. A lot of rings on that tree, but I don't know. Yeah, like there's going to be more coming soon, in the next week, next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So I don't know.
So
Not closing the
someone
book
put
on
out there
Offseason.
today, it might have been passing. I apologize, I can't remember who. Saying that the Tigers were in on Bregman, but they don't want to get to 200 million total. Now, it seems like that's the only reason you pick that is because it's a big round number. But do we think that Chris Ilitch is not willing to go that high for a player like that?
So, well, I think the first story came out a week or two ago that the Astros had given Bregman an offer, and it was like 6 years and 156 million. It was something like 26 million a year, and then Bregman and Boris were hoping for 200 million. And so that was the story that came out there. So I don't know if they're still holding out for that, if that's where the number 200 comes from or what. I 1 year, 199 million. That would throw them over the luxury tax threshold, which is death knell for teams. But I actually think, and again, like I've never talked with Chris Ilitch or Scott Harris for that matter, right? Like I don't really know. I couldn't speak to their personalities or anything like that. But to me, if I'm Boris, I think it's a lot easier to sell that to Chris Ilitch than it is to sell to Scott Harris, if that makes sense. And the way I look at it is like, again, I don't know Chris Ilitch from anything. So but he comes from a businessman family, right? And I think he would be enough of a businessman to know, the Tigers have made kind of a big deal about these new luxury seats behind home plate, right? Like you would think that they would know not to do that unless you're also providing the fans a reason to come and buy those tickets. Mm-hmm. It's like, the heated seats alone aren't enough for however much money those things are going to be. And so I think Boris, you could say, okay, it's going to cost you 30 million or whatever, but here's the return on your investment. And it's going to bring this many people in. It's going to bring you this money. And I think that's a fairly easy argument to make to Chris Ilitch, and probably one that he would believe. The harder one to me is the one to Scott Harris, where you say, Alex Bregman's this level of player. He's going to give you a 3 to 5 WAR next year, right? And it's going to cost you this amount of money. And is it better for you? Is it more rational to sign up for that and then take the end of that contract? Or is it better for you to try to find, 3 to 5 wins elsewhere for a third of the price? And I feel like and then give yourself another shot the following year, like, that optionality that they always talk about. And I think that's the harder argument. I don't think Ilitch has his thumb on the scale that much. If Scott Harris said, hey, we want Alex Bregman for 8 years and $200 million, I think Chris Ilitch would probably okay it. I don't know what their budget is, though. It's entirely possible that, they just don't, you don't have another $25 million in the budget, but that would feel pretty lame considering they're already in like the top or the bottom 5 in salary this year.
Exactly.
Speaking of Boris, this is his comments about the Yankees here, and this plays a part with the Bregman situation.
I can't hear him.
I wouldn't. I don't think you. First of all, when you're at a wedding, you don't talk about the bridesmaids. Yeah. Well, I'm not here to address why or why not. All I know is that I've been waiting a long time for one in the group to send me the signal of who I can close with and work out the final details.
All right, so that was Scott Boris on the Yankees he doesn't talk about. When you're at the wedding, you don't talk about the bridesmaids. And there's, I guess, sources going around that, that basically the Boris and the Yankees relationship is, quote, borderline unrepairable. And it's possible the Yankees won't even get a crack at future Scott Boris clients.
Wow. Where did that come from?
That came from Brett Hanfing although, again, I'm not sure how legit he is, but.
I mean, there have been a couple nice articles about, the big time reporters, the Buster Olneys and the Jeff Passons of the world. They report it, but they also get, the behind the scenes stories. And there was one in the Athletic, I think one on ESPN. And all right.
Nice.
Traverse City Company's making the heating cooling for the new seats. At
Like
least
that.
they're keeping it in state.
Yeah.
Side note, I also saw that apparently there's a city in the Upper Peninsula that makes all the basketball courts. But so I mean, the reports were that the Yankees offered 16 years and $750 million. It's not like they were, they were insulting him or anything like that. It just everything. It sounded like from what I read that a lot of times GMs will ask Scott Boras, one of these big clients, like, "Hey, what's a number that will make you sign immediately?" And I don't know. And sometimes they will say that. And in this one, he said, I don't know. We're just going to let it, whatever number you guys give us, we'll just keep going and going back and forth. And it ultimately, it sounded like it came down to Soto, his potential relationship with the owner. He felt like, and I don't think he felt like insulted or anything like that, but Hal Steinbrenner kind of kept his distance. And by his accounting, it was that he didn't want to overwhelm Soto or make him feel weird or whatever. But apparently Soto wants that. He wants to feel close with ownership. And Cohen had him over at his house and was talking to him about that. And the Yankees have these weird they're the Yankees, right? So they have to maintain certain things like not having beards, right? But also they never gave Derek Jeter a private suite for his family. So they can't give one to Judge or Soto. And Steve Cohen was like, yeah, what the hell? Who cares? And like little things like that. And so that just made Soto more comfortable. And it's like, okay, it's hard for me to believe that the Yankees and Boras would have a terrible relationship. I'm sure that, Garrett Cole's a Boras client, isn't he?
I guess so. I don't know. Well, I also heard that Soto had some problems with some political issues in the Yankee clubhouse.
I think that was fake. I
Really?
find that hard to believe that. I mean, there was a story that like several players came into the clubhouse wearing like full
Trump gear.
Trump gear. And I'm like, I don't think that's true.
Yeah, I was surprised to read it myself, but there it was.
It just feels like people can write anything now, and it's like,
yeah,
we're in a post-truth society where the things that are true sound fake. Like there's like an army of drones flying over New Jersey right now, and everybody's like, I don't know, is it real? Who knows? But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's true, maybe not. I thought that felt like that Corbin Burns comment to me. It felt like just somebody taking the piss, as they say.
Maybe so.
What I've enjoyed on Twitter is the amount of Yankee fans burning the jerseys and doing their customary and every team does this too, but that there was a guy who stood outside the Mets City Field and was comparing how much of a dump it is around the stadium versus Yankee Stadium and why would you go to this dump. I don't think Juan Soto hangs out in the neighborhood right by the stadium. He could, I don't know. But again, and also maybe another thing too, I mean, I hate that. Like, I don't want to think this, but there is a lot more Hispanic players on the Mets than there are with the Yankees. I mean,
let's see.
Well, he's supposed to. People talking about he's not loyal. Crap, he was in the Yankee for 1 year. I mean, it's not like they raised him from childhood.
Exactly. That's just the way. That's the way fans are, right? You feel like it's personal when a player chooses another team. You go all the way back to the Max Scherzer turning down Dave Dombrowski in a way that Dave Dombrowski had never been scorned before and was so angry about it he had to write a strongly worded letter. But and this is what, and not to turn it to a sad place or a negative place in the future, but the Yankees pivoted from Soto to signing Max Fried for 8 years and $218 million.
Yeah.
And my immediate thought was, well, there is your very, very baseline floor for what it costs to keep Tarek Skubal. And if you want to sign him now, you're probably going 10 years and $300 million because right now he's younger. Like in 2 years, he'll be younger than Max Fried is right now, slightly, but he's younger and he'll have had a higher ceiling, maybe not as much track record as Fried, but in 2 years, maybe he will.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what it's going to cost to keep Tarek Skubal. And if you think Scott Harris and Chris Ilitch are going to sign a pitcher for 8 years, 10 years, and $300 million, I've got some bad news for you. I don't think it's happening. So, I mean, I hate to get into all this after we went through it all at the trade deadline last year, but I think, and I was thinking, after the smoke settles or smoke clears and everything settles and Corbin Burns signs somewhere, that you might quietly make Skubal available, which sucks. You don't want to do it right after a Cy Young, but I don't know. Maybe the Phillies want to. The Phillies want to give you, Christopher Sanchez and Alec Boehm and a prospect for Tarek Skubal. I don't know. Hopefully that won't happen. Hopefully they'll go out and sign Roki Sasaki, and they'll have this dynamite top 3, top 4 rotation for at least 2 years, and go for it. But I don't know.
I mean, I look at by the way, Stan is from the New York area, so I mean, his insight about that pretty much is correct, because you chose in New York that gives the Yankees a black eye. Bada boom, bada bing. Basically, Chris, I like you, but you're depressing me. Keep it real.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, we all, as fans, we all want the best players to stay, and we want them to sign them forever, and we want them to go out and sign the big name free agents, because that's what it was under Mike Ilitch for the most part. And it's just not going to be that way anymore, I don't think, unfortunately. Until they prove it, to prove us otherwise, I've got to be more of a realist about it.
I mean, if you look at it, though, from a historical standpoint, the Mike Ilitch era of ownership between 2000, roughly 2003 when he started spending money or so, 2008, 2004, until he passed away, was probably the only time, really, the Tigers actually spent money as an organization. I mean, you go back to Tom Monahan, for example. Monahan never spent money. And I mean, if they did, like, for example, getting Darrell Evans, and getting him was somewhat of a big deal, but they had certain sacrifices that had to be made. I mean, the Tigers were running everything on the Tigers were responsible. Were one of the teams that were in collusion during the mid '80s for guys like Kirk Gibson and Jack Morris, and Tommy Brookins, and Parrish. So, as an organization, I mean, and again, I'm not trying to be a wet blanket with this, but the Tigers also, to be fair though, on the flip side of the coin, they drafted very well. They were able to develop prospects very well for a good period of 15 to 20 years. And so, yeah, Ilitch did not spend the 90s because, quite frankly, he was not. I mean, if we're going to be keeping it real here, quote unquote, they didn't spend on Tiger Stadium because Tiger Stadium they wanted a new stadium, and he didn't spend until they got a new ballpark. It's as simple as that. You could tell me otherwise, but they put a little lipstick on the pig when they did that little Tigers court thing at Tiger Stadium. In high school, I remember going, "What is this? It's not. It didn't do anything to enhance the value of Tiger Stadium." Again, you can say what you want about Randy Smith, but the reason why he made all those trades is because he had no choice. They did not, they did not have they had to flip everybody because he couldn't spend any money. They could give Luis Gonzalez a raise, and for Christ's sake. Hideki Onomo, the only good pitcher on that road, was it 2002 team?
Yeah. 2000, I think.
Yeah, 2000 team. I'm sorry, 2000. Thank you. 2000. The Tigers had Nomo coming off a really good year, and they couldn't re-sign him. They didn't want to spend on him. They wanted to spend on Nomo, who at that point was past his prime in his career, and ended up having some good seasons in Boston. So historically speaking, for me, I have to go back and go, oh, wait a minute. The 12 of the first 13 years, Mike ownership, the Tigers finished on 500. Yeah, absolutely correct.
Well, I feel like sometime in the last year, we found an old thing about the payroll for the Tigers in the mid 90s, and they were actually like in the top 5.
Yes.
But it was
Cecil Fielder.
Yeah.
Primarily.
And like they had, I think Tony Phillips was making a decent amount of money, but the problem was it was all on hitters. I thought the pitching was so bad, and they had nobody coming from within.
Yeah,
to save them.
They signed Mike Moore, who at that point was very cooked in his career,
Yeah.
and Tim Belcher, and that was a disaster. That was a 1-year disaster. Tim Belcher was coming off, I think, a pretty good year in LA with the Dodgers, and the Tigers they tried to address pitching through free agency to a certain extent, and I say that in quotations. Bill Gullickson, not a strikeout pitcher, but he was a veteran at that point. Was
won 20 games.
Won 20 games. Yeah. I mean, I'm saying some names here, crazy clowns laughing in there, but yeah, those names that they spent money on were not sexy names, and they could not develop pitching to save their life. Kevin Ritz, Scott Alfred. I mean, I'm going off the top of my head here. Yeah, I can go on and on about. There's Greg Gore that traded for the Angels, of course. You know, there's all these guys are just clown shoes. No offense to Crazy Clown in the chat, but but some of these guys.
I don't think. Now hold on a second. I don't think Crazy Clown is actually a clown.
Yeah,
it's possible.
Yeah, but, I like his icon. It's pretty cool. It reminds me of Doink the Clown from WWF. But the amount of pitching mishaps that they had in the 90s was laughable. I mean, they tried every single thing they could do. You tried every single Astro, Dave Malecki, Scott Sanders from the Padres. They tried everything.
Yeah.
And look, and Nelton, you're not coming off negative. I understand why you're concerned, but the reason why I think people like our approach to this podcast format is we try to keep things realistic as possible. Although sometimes we've been told we're homers, which doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway.
So going back to Elton, earlier he mentioned power. Where would you go with this? I mean, we've touched on all these guys at various points, and I'm sure we'll talk about them again. But, you're going to need a pretty sizable contract for Bregman. And we all know what he brings. He's a good defender. He probably hit about 20 homers. Maybe he has a little bit better year than he had last year because he was better in the second half. And you're probably looking at a 7 or 8 year commitment. But he's not a big power guy. He's a decent power guy. Would a shorter contract for Santander be better for this team and what they need? I don't know.
That's a good question. There's been a little very, very quiet. You know, that's interesting you mentioned that, Uper, because I sent this to Chris earlier about Baltimore, about basically they don't want, even though the owner gave them the green light to spend money, they're not going to spend money. But there's been nothing on Sandlander at all. Nothing, like zero.
Mm-hmm. You got a guy who had 40 home runs last year, so he's capable of at least maybe giving you 30, even if he comes back a little bit. But he also is going to hit about 228, and with a decent on base. So, and only play first base.
I keep picturing Santander in Toronto or something like that. But yeah, I don't know why you haven't heard much about him. There are several players you haven't heard a whole lot about. But to the Bregman thing, he reminds me an awful lot of Ian Kinsler as just a really good all-around player. And I think if you look at when the Tigers got Kinsler when he was 32, I think. And I think he gave them 4 very good seasons. Maybe the last one was closer to average. But that's sort of what I'm expecting from Bregman. You're going to get 15 to 25 home runs. He's going to hit for average. He's going to get on base. He's going to steal a couple bases. He's going to play good defense. And everything you hear about him is he's a tremendous locker room presence and leader and things like that. And the Tigers do need power. And this is something I mentioned in our, in one of the group chats the other day, is they definitely need power, but they also need guys who can get on base. They finished last year tied with the Marlins for the 29th on base percentage in baseball. It was like 301 or 302 or something like that. They didn't hit for a ton of power. They were like 25th in home runs, but they were like 20th in isolated power. So they have, gap power. They need offensive players. And everything about Bregman fits this team except for the price tag. And I feel like, and somebody else posted this in our Discord the other day. It's the Andrew Friedman quote about, like, if every free agent decision you make is rational, you'll finish third on every free agent. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to go, okay, screw it. Spend some money. We'll worry about that later. I would like to see that. Alex Bregman makes so much sense for this team. In a way, I think more than Matt Chapman made last year. Because even though Chapman was more of a power guy and that glove at third base, I don't think any of us really thought the Tigers were, I don't know. I don't think we thought they were a playoff team. I guess we all kind of predicted that their win total would be somewhat close. Mm-hmm. But now they went out and proved it, and they showed a bunch of, young guys that might be able to help. And I don't know, it does feel like it's time to put your foot on the gas pedal a little bit. And you've got this option there. And it just feels, it would be annoying if it turns out that, Bregman returns to the Astros because they offered him more than the Tigers did. Like, that'd just be a bummer to me. And
here's another thing too. It's not your money. It's the team's money. And that's where I kind of always laugh about this, or kind of like I pause and go, well, wait a minute. why do you care how if the Tigers are spending that much money? Because you're worried about the Baez thing happening with Bregman. Bregman and Baez are two different players, as far as like just their hitting makeup go, and even the way they approach their approach at the plate. If you're not, I mean, scared money don't make none. I mean, it's Tribe Called Quest one's saying, and it's true. Like if you have to, here's the thing with, we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but Jace Young had a wrist injury, and Chris and I, we talked about that all summer. He looks hurt. There's something wasn't right. And and it wasn't an assumption. It was just based off the way he was playing. And of course the power was zapped because this is a guy last year almost hit 30 home runs. I think he hit 30 home runs last year across the system. I think
29 or 30,
29 or something like that. They're two different. Anyway, he was a different player when he came up here, and you know why. However, I still think he can't handle third base. I think he's better suited at second base. Now you're hearing that they're going to put Malloy and keep seeing some time at first base. So I think that the Tigers are, and I wrote this today in the defensive article tools piece you can find on TigersMLReport.com. The Tigers are just looking for defensive versatility. And Bregman kind of solves that in the sense that it allows them to go, okay, we're set at third. We can worry about everything else across the infield. And I mean, I know they're the Korean shortstop Kim too as well, I believe was rumored but the shoulder injuries that I would be more, if the Tigers gave him a lot of money, I'd be more concerned about that because anything with a shoulder, it's kind of like, so I don't know. I think Bregman is a guy who would be an ideal fit because the leadership qualities, the fact that he's familiar with how Hinch runs his clubhouse. And to me, it's just one of those things where I know the long-term deal, the 7-year deal, but I guarantee you that there's going to be some sort of like opt-out after year 3, after year 4. Teams are doing that more and more. And it's becoming more of a standard across the industry. And so I think that would be a case. Maybe after year 4, he opts out or the team has an option. I don't know. But it would seem like the Tigers front office, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They are a lot smarter on putting these things into place. And so I think that in this case, it's not like where it's the old days where it's going to be like 7 years, 210 million, or, the Juan Gonzalez deal that never happened. They're not going to be stuck. They're going to find ways to opt out and put these incentives in the contract.
Yeah, and I think that, if Bregman kind of degrades as a player, it'll probably be in the form of power, right? Where suddenly he's, barely hitting double-digit home runs, which is not ideal for a third baseman, but I think you could probably get away with playing him at second base. I don't think you necessarily have to be super fast to play second base or quick and
how long has it been since he played short?
He played in college, of course, but I don't know how much.
There a year he played short for the Astros?
I'm checking right now. I thought he filled in there for a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's see, shortstop. He played 65 games at shortstop in 2019. That's the last time.
Oh, it's been a while. Okay.
Yeah. He's only played like 9 games at second base in his big league career. So he's been a third baseman and a pretty damn good third baseman.
Yeah.
Has one of the greatest plays I've ever seen in the World Series a couple years ago. Just an inch perfect throw to get a runner at home plate. Just remarkable. But I don't know. Like, I think that the Tigers should sign him. It'd be unfortunate if they don't, but it'll be. I don't know. Ultimately, it could be up to him too. I could see the Tigers making a better offer and him just choosing to stay in Houston. But I hope that they're at least making a competitive offer.
No, if Houston trades Framber Valdez and they trade Kyle Tucker, I mean, is he going to want to stay there?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, the proposed trade that's out there, right, is the Tucker to the Cubs and then getting Paredes in return, and he's an absolutely ideal fit to play third base in Houston because all he does is hit little bloops into the left field bleachers.
Yeah,
and that's it. There's no place better to do that than Houston. I mean, that one would make sense for both sides, I think. But I mean that feels like it's kind of hinging on if they don't re-sign Bregman, then maybe it's time to do like a mini rebuild in Houston and trading Tucker because he's another guy. He's a free agent next year. He'll be the guy that everybody's clamoring for next year, getting $450 million or something like that. So again, you can't keep every single amazing homegrown player because then that's your entire salary.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's a thought too that Bregman's career is on a decline. Look, if he was 35, yeah, I can understand it. But again, I think it's that you do the Tampa Bay Rays thing, and anything over 31, you're just like, nah, I'm good. But but how else are you going to address third base? If you're, for example, the Nolan Arenado news is that Tigers are not one of the 6 teams he's going to take a trade to. So unless he's suddenly on the last minute decides that he wants to come here, the Tigers are, SOL on that.
I mean, again, you can rationalize it and say, yeah, this is not going to work out. But why do all the good teams always side players like this, right? Like it's not that of a mystery. It's not the only way to build a winning team, right? We see teams compete and have good rosters of homegrown talent. We talk about Cleveland, we talk about Milwaukee, you talk about Tampa. Oakland, to a certain extent, does that with other people's scraps. But those guys aren't winning the World Series. You occasionally you need to splurge on a big name, in part just for the feels, man, the vibes, right? Like right now, if you're a Tigers fan, say the offseason ends with Alex Cobb and Kirby Smart. Is there any reason to get you to the park more than last year? You go see Scooble, right? And Green, and maybe you're really into Parker Meadows and Colt Keith and stuff like that. But I don't know, like you sign a star, and you could argue that Bregman's star is dimming, right? Every baseball player declines in his 30s for the most part, unless you're Raul Banez or David Ortiz or some other steroid-addled early
Nelson
2000s
Cruz.
player,
Yeah.
Marlon Byrd or something. But it's kind of the price you pay, right? You understand that. You go into that. You build your farm system around that. In the Tigers, there's nothing that says you can't keep building your farm system the way it's going. But they don't have. They're picking 24th this year, right? You're not getting another Bryce Rayner. So I don't know. It just feels like it's time to make a move.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Even look at the Tigers signed Omar Bustamante. It's a catcher, minor league catcher. I don't know, just
Bustamante.
Bustamante.
Was that today or?
That was yesterday.
Is he an actual player, or is that just another late international signing?
Late international signing.
Yeah, because I think they have until the 15th to sign people for last year's international class.
Yeah,
that's a 70 grade name for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, they lost Iker Weezy.
I was so
favorite names.
I was so pissed about that.
Well, I mean, and that's interesting. When you were talking about, they haven't signed a bunch of these minor leaguers. Well, they didn't protect. They lost a handful of guys in the minor league portion of the Rule 5 draft. So they didn't feel it was worth protecting Josh Crouch or Jack Anderson or Iker Weezy, and who else? They lost somebody else. One other person, I thought. The Sadrak guy, that Sadrak Franco, who they just acquired the other day not the other day, but like a month ago from the Angels, and had never actually played in their system. But
yeah,
I know other teams are viewing the Tigers as a decent place to get some talent. So I think that's a good sign, right? That's a sign of overall strength of your organization.
I mean, Gage Workman going to the Cubs at 10 surprised a lot of people because, I mean, he now becomes it gives him a guy who can play third and short pretty effectively. And so you work up the strikeout rate was always a big concern. Liam Hicks, though, at number 2, still blows my mind. That one is still, I mean, I know I've talked about that earlier in the podcast, but it's just, I'm just astonished. Like, really? But then,
let me look.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to look at the Marlins 40-man because I thought that Hicks was a decent bet to be added for the Tigers just because they don't have another catcher worthy of putting on the 40-man, really, right?
Yeah.
They have Dingler and Rogers right now. I'm sure they'll bring in a couple veteran Anthony Bemboom types, Dustin Garneau's of the world. But it's just, he's a left-handed hitter. He doesn't have any real power and is not a great defender. At least it's mostly his arm isn't terribly strong, but got a career 405 on base percentage or something like that. There's, if you want that guy to be kind of your third string emergency catcher, there's worse things you can have. I guess if you're the Marlins and you're not planning on being good at all, you could take a chance on that. He's not a very high upside player, but I could see him sticking on the roster just because he does offer some skills.
Yeah, but I agree with you with Raj. The fact that he was second or third overall in the draft was the surprise, right? Seems like he's somebody you could have gotten later, more than likely.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
I would have bet on an upside arm at that spot.
You would think so, yeah.
Like,
yeah, I mean, it is the Marlins, right? We're talking, but I'm looking at the other catchers on their 40-man roster. Agustin Ramirez is a guy they got from the Yankees, right? He's a fairly highly touted prospect, but he's a Yankees catcher, so he's probably mostly a first baseman. And then the other are Nick Fortes and Johnny Pereda. Anybody familiar with their work?
No.
Nick Fortes, career 222 hitter. Has 23 home runs in his major league career in 304 games.
Okay.
Johnny Pereda, 28. Both of those guys are 28. Johnny Pereda played 20 games last year, hit 231. They might just not have any catching at all in their system. And it could be one of those situations where they try to, they end up trading for Hicks. They can't keep him on the major league roster. They'll just trade for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you look at like Workman, and Richard's correct. Workman has done a better job since he's gone to the one side of the plate. This was the first year since I think it's the first time in his career above AA. And the first time since his rookie season or since his professional debut, where he struck out under 30%. I mean, it was like 28, 29%, something like that. But the Tigers did draft Junior Tillian, a light hitting infielder, essentially from the Mets system. So that's who the Tigers drafted in the minor league Rule 5 phase of the draft. So yeah, Jack Anderson too. What was funny about the when I looked at when I saw who signed the Padres who got the reliever. Why am I drawing a blank all of a sudden his name? Ezekiel or Chris, help me out here. The reliever West Michigan.
Wait, you're not talking about our Iker Weezy?
Yeah, Weezy.
Oh, okay.
It makes sense because he was at West Michigan, Fort Wayne, being a Padres affiliate. See a lot of them. Probably something they like, something advanced analytics with that. But Jack Anderson going to Boston was also kind of a surprise to me a little bit. Yeah,
and Kyle Boddy is there in Boston, and he was talking about, getting some of those minor league free agents. And Jack Anderson was a guy that, we liked at times. He's kind of he had a lot of, remember, he had an awful lot of spin, I think.
Yeah.
And a pretty solid downer curveball. He just didn't have much velocity. And he was a former closer at Florida State, I think. And, he just felt like a organizational depth arm. But so maybe the Red Sox see something there that they can optimize, maybe get him throwing harder somehow. I don't know. But yeah, I wouldn't. And, Weezy was dominant in low A, but he got up to West Michigan briefly and didn't go so well in a couple outings that didn't necessarily, make me think that he couldn't do that. But he just apparently was not part of their plans the way someone like Yosber Sanchez apparently seems to be.
Yeah. Speaking of Garrett, all things Boston, Crochet ends up going to the Red Sox and a pretty hefty return for the White Sox, as the White Sox farm system is still, even after this trade, I mean, it's still not in a better shape than, I mean, it's still got a long ways to go. But as far as this team being close to competing, Braden Montgomery, who was just drafted this year, and Kyle Teal go to Chicago. And I'm trying to think of, there was a third outfield. Was it Travis Jankowski?
Chase Maidroth, I think, right?
Oh, okay.
And they got a pitcher.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would, when you look at that trade, Boston held. I know it's a good trade, but Boston held on to their top three, right? I mean, they held on to Marcelo Meyer and Campbell and Roman Anthony. So that, to me, not a bad deal. I like Boston's move to get Crochet more than I like the Yankees signing Fried.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he's got a higher ceiling. I mean, had he been able to pitch, more innings last year, he would have challenged Skubal for the Cy Young, I think. Pulling a Steve Carlton, right? Where being the only good thing on a terrible team and still being very good. Now maybe he couldn't have held up over that many innings, but yeah, I mean, there's a chance that Garrett Crochet's the best pitcher in baseball next year, and it's a pretty decent chance actually, just given the arm strength and his stuff. And yeah, I mean, the way you're supposed to evaluate trades, right, is whoever gets the best player in the deal wins the trade. But I don't blame the White Sox for making this deal. I do think they got a pretty good return. Like Teal, I think Teal could probably be an average big leaguer. He's a very kind of aggressive hitter, but in a good way. And I think he can stick behind the plate. In Montgomery I think it was a top 10 pick, or should have been, was considered a top 10 pick. I don't think he went in the top 10, did he?
He broke his leg in the College World Series. A lot of people thought he was moving up into maybe even to the top 6. And then he busted his leg.
So another interesting about the winter meetings too has been Seattle hasn't done a trade yet. So it's almost like the Poto's like, is he itching? I'm surprised he hasn't done anything yet, but there's been talks about Luis Castillo for Trenton Chaos or Casas.
Tristan Casas. Yeah.
Yeah.
That one made sense to me. Like there was even, the talks like, they would trade Casas to get Castillo and then move Devers to first and then sign Bregman. And I was like, man, if they did that, that'd be, that'd be a hell of a winter meetings. And it hasn't happened, but doesn't mean it won't. But I mean, I give Boston credit for going after a really good pitcher. I wouldn't have hated if the Tigers had tried to get Crochet, but it didn't, I don't know. That's, trading within your division is always a little bit iffy especially for a player like that, like a really dominant player. I know it probably doesn't matter that much, but it's more the Tigers don't want, Kevin McGonigal and Briseño or whoever they would have had to give up tormenting them 5 years down the road.
Could be.
Yeah. Like I said, even tonight is kind of outside of Thursday night football, which is what the Rams and 49ers, it's been a relatively quiet night in terms of sports. But again, even as we head into, I can't believe it's already the middle of December already. It just seems like time's gone by. But I think it's still, it's literally just perfectly said. Things are still moving slow, but I think what's going to happen is one move, another move. Like it's just going to be a series of, somebody. By the way, sometimes I see some of these various accounts on Twitter, because Twitter is still, or X, I go to sometimes. It's when you see some of the free agent predictions, like for example, there's a couple people saying that Sasaki to Detroit, Burns to San Francisco, Hernandez to the Yankees, Tanner Scott to Toronto, Christian Walker to Houston. I don't know. So Boston has turned down the rumor Devers to first base rumor. Okay, well, there you go.
So Sasaki, obviously there's a limit to how much money he can get, right? Because everybody's limited by their pool. And so now it comes down to relationships, right? And where he wants to play. And we've all read that. The Tigers, have their pitching coach win an award. I don't know if that's a major award, but it's a nice award. He'd be on staff for him to work with. Would it matter to you if you were Sasaki, and none of us are? We're not 21-year-olds with golden arms. Okay, we're not. So that's fine. But if the Tigers went out and signed an Alex Bregman, and you could say, hey, we were on the verge last season with our hot finish of all these young guys coming together. Now we've added this big time third baseman. Do you want to be a part of this with Chris Fetter? Is that enough of a pitch? Does that make any dent into Sasaki?
Yeah. I mean, Chris Fetter won the Baseball America's MLB Coach of the Year award. So congratulations to Chris Fetter, who, this is a guy that deserves it. I mean, from what he did this year, he MacGyvered a rotation. I know that MacGyver is a person, and using him as an adjective is weird, but you can use it as an adjective because it seems like the most popular thing it's actually the better way to do it, because now sometimes when I say MacGyver, people's like, who? Anyway, and it's just not just him, of course, Dr. Robert Lung, Juan Nieves, that whole staff, you bring up a good point, Uper. If you have somebody like Fetter with that kind of pedigree, what he's able to do with, I mean, he did with Flaherty, he did with Michael Lorenzo. He's done this with a lot of pitchers. So it's just the Tigers have been able to, at least if there's something that we've witnessed with the Tigers that I thought I'd never see in a million years, is become a pitching factory. I mean, if in terms of like eternally making pitchers better. I mean, if you look at, I know the rotation of Verlander, Scherzer, but those guys are already good. Sanchez, those guys were really good. But the Tigers are taking pitchers and making them better, and that's something we've never witnessed before, ever. I mean, you can make the case of Roger Craig helping Jack Morris and Dan Petrie learn a split finger fastball
A million years ago, yeah.
a million years ago. But no one knows what the hell I'm talking about when I say that. So, but yeah, there's something to be said about that.
I mean, Rick Knapp didn't turn things around for a lot of young pitchers when he was here.
Bob Cluck.
Forgot about Block.
Rick Anderson.
Yeah. Cluck. Yeah. So Sasaki stuff, like I want to believe that, right? I want to believe that he's an interesting guy who doesn't necessarily want to go to a city on the West Coast or, a high profile city. And I it's just one of those things. I'll believe it when I see it. The Tigers are in the group that could theoretically offer him the most money. They do, they have agreements with players years in advance, right? And including one of the top players this year, Chris Rodriguez, I think is expected to get like $3.2 million. And so they're not going to renege on that. I wouldn't think. They may, go back on some other players if they need to. But so they have $7.5 million overall in international bonus pool money. But they can trade, I think, for up to 60% of that in addition. So, and that would be one of those things, like if we suddenly hear the Tigers are trading for more international space, then I might start to believe it. But I don't know. Until then, you just kind of, I guess, cross your fingers and hope that somehow they land Sasaki. It's hard for me to picture it. It would be fun though, because then at that point they would have arguably the two best pitching prospects in baseball, both coming up at the same time, which would be fun.
I mean, like I said, by the way, there's a very spirited debate in our YouTube chat about how the Tigers are. Look, let's just say this. Tigers have took a step up this year. They saw really good development in Parker Meadows and some of the younger players. That is worth noting. However, there are some significant gaps the Tigers need to fill with free agency, whether it's free agency or making a trade, to make this team get better for next season, because every team is going to get better. I mean, Boston has significantly already improved themselves. It's still very early in the offseason. But that being said, I think that there is in terms of just going back and forth about whether there's a team on the rise or not, just to me, if the Tigers make a move to get just a little bit better, I think there's just so much buzz about this team. And to summarize, Chris, I like what you said earlier about the luxury seats. They put them out there for a reason. They're gonna. I mean, if you're going, Tiger fans are. I mean, even with like right now, I don't know if you guys saw it today, but Lions season tickets went up again, like humongous, a lot.
Do they? Well,
yeah.
Hey, supply and demand, right?
Supply and demand.
Well, I would hope, we talked about this when it happened, that the message they got from last year was, boy, if we put out a winning product, the fans really show up and have fun and support. It's crazy. And I guess the one thing they haven't seen is what happens when they make that happen before the season, right? When they get excited free agents and people come and show up in droves early in the season, like they used to in 2012 and 2013, when they knew that they were a World Series contender. And I can't guarantee that signing Alex Bregman would suddenly lead to a surge in season tickets or, attendance going up 10,000 per game in April, but it can't hurt. It's certainly not going to negatively affect that aspect. And it just would be nice to reward the fans and to give yourself a slightly better shot at winning. And right now, bats are cheaper than pitching. I talked about it earlier. Pitching's costing you $8.5 million per WAR. Bats are like $7 million. So go get them.
So
go ahead.
Well, real quick, I wonder if any factor in Bregman is the draft pick they got to give up, right? I mean, they have to give up the 34th pick.
Yeah,
which is a nice pick.
Well, no, I actually they would not. They would have to give up their third pick.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah,
Not the
because
second pick.
because they don't, or because they are. Is it because they're a revenue receiving team? I have to go back and look at this. I thought
there's some of the
I
Oh,
thought
so
that they
it's more
would.
like around that 70 mark.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh,
I'd have to check to be
or
sure
90, whatever that is.
because it involves it involves the team, and also if you're a revenue receiver, a revenue payer. I have to look at it.
Well,
Let
and
me go
that's a
look.
big thing to me. I mean, if they're not giving up the 34th pick, I mean, that would, not that you shouldn't pass on Bregman because of that, but that's still a factor. But now if it's more like around the 90th pick or whatever, well, screw that. Who cares?
Yeah. I don't think it affects the international money side of things either. I don't think so. I mean, I think the Tigers have been. I don't think it doesn't affect it. Does it, Chris? I mean, in terms of international money.
If what happens, I'm sorry.
Oh, somebody was talking about any international money as well. Like if they
sign Bregman. I don't think they lose anything on that.
No, you lose international money if you are like teams like the Yankees and Mets and Dodgers lose international bonus pool money because they're over certain luxury tax thresholds. I don't think you lose that for signing free agents. I don't think. I'm going through to.
Yeah, my weakness is when it comes to the money part of it. That's where I'm just still getting better at understanding how that works. It comes to contracts. So there's some good people out there that can talk contracts wax poetically pretty well on that. The Yankees lost $1 million for signing Max. So
okay.
Yeah, maybe it's because
they're over.
Well, the Yankees are over that luxury tax threshold. The Yankees, Mets, and Dodgers are also having their first draft pick drop 10 slots because they're over that threshold. So instead of picking 27th, 28th, 29th, or whatever, they're picking 37th, 38th, and 39th. The one thing I'm trying to figure out, what it costs for the Tigers if they were to sign one of these guys. I'm on it. I've looked this up like 8 times. I'm pretty sure it's their third draft pick, but I'm checking. All right. Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, any team that signs a player who's rejected a qualifying offer is subject to the loss of one or more draft picks. Their highest first round pick is exempt for forfeiture. So there are 3 tiers of draft pick forfeiture based on the financial status of the signing team. So competitive balance taxpayers, a team that exceeds the competitive tax threshold, like the Yankees, they lose their second and fifth highest selections, as well as $1 million from their international bonus pool.
There you go.
Revenue sharing recipients, so that would be the Tigers. They receive revenue sharing money, will lose its third highest selection in the following year's draft. If it signs 2 such players, it will forfeit its 4th highest pick. So all other teams lose its second highest. So if the Tigers get revenue sharing, which I think they do now, then they'd lose their third pick, which is somewhere in probably the 65 to 75 range. Somewhere around there. Yeah.
That's far more palatable.
It's a difference in about probably $1.5 million in terms of bonus slot money. It would be a bummer to me if that was like what was holding them back. Like, we don't want to lose that draft pick. Like, okay, yeah, you guys have drafted pretty well, but settle down. Yeah. You're not getting Alex Bregman in the 30th round now.
Yeah. By the way, Akil Baddoo, by the way, in order to make room for the roster spot, Akil Baddoo was designated for assignment. So far as of recording, he hasn't been signed anywhere else. I mean, I still think he's in a 10-day period anyway, so the clock just began on him anyway. But who knows? He might end up back in Toledo. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so the rumors today were just to encapsulate all of them, where there's interest in Bregman, interest in Yates, interest in who else have the Tigers been linked to today?
Roki,
Sasaki.
You've heard like in passing mention. I think Evan Petzold had something about maybe Christian Walker or something like that, but that one feels less likely to me because that you're also losing a draft pick for that.
Yeah.
Now maybe if you go and sign Bregman, you go, oh, what the hell? We already lost our top 3 pick. Now who cares if we lose our 4th pick? But because I don't think Walker would be more than like 3 years because he's 34, I think. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I haven't really heard any other real links to the Tigers. I assume they're looking at multiple bullpen arms, but I haven't heard any other names.
Yeah, the bullpen. But speaking of bullpens, too, man, correct me if I'm wrong, but on the free agent side of things, it just seems that's been quiet too, isn't it?
Yeah, for the most part. Like the biggest names are still out there. Somebody was mentioning today that Jeff Hoffman wants to try starting again.
Yeah,
which
that's true.
I mean, okay, go for it, guy. You were a terrible starter, but hey, whatever it takes. I was saying, he comes here and signs as an opener, and then they'll also use him at the end of games. But yeah, I don't know why. It just the way that the market has played out so far. It was mostly this kind of middle tier starting pitching signed first, and then we've had a couple of the big bats, and then a couple big starters. But most of the relievers, I'm trying to look.
Bada Bing says trade for Devin Williams. You know what's interesting? I laugh, and he's a great pitcher. Don't get me wrong. The airbender is so cool. But it's just so funny. The 2 times I watched last year, I really caught the whole outing. He sucked. Got crushed.
Well, the game against gave up that home run to Alonso, right?
Yes, that one, and then he got crushed by the Cardinals one night.
So far, there have been 5 relievers who have signed for more than $2.5 million per year. Blake Trinan, Aroldis Chapman, Jordan Romano, Yimi Garcia, and Aaron Bummer. After that, there's 5 or 6 relievers, but they're all making $2.5 million or less. So yeah, the big names are still out there. Big Tanner Scott, Hoffman, David Robertson. He's old but still out there. Joe Kelly is still out there. There are some interesting. Like I liked AJ Minter, Jose Leclerc would be interesting. There's some interesting relievers out there. It's just that market. I don't know if it's always like this, but that market does seem to kind of come together late as teams are filling out the rest of their roster.
You got to believe Kirby Yates. It would be 2 years tops, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to play around with that in my head. Like, what would Scott Harris do to get Kirby Yates? I think he would be more inclined to do like a more expensive 1-year deal. That way, you can also trade him if things go wrong at the deadline, or if things don't go wrong, right? Like even if somebody else emerges and you feel like you can move him. Because I was thinking, would they give him a year, like a 2-year deal that has an opt out or something like that, like they gave Chafin, maybe. But I think Scott Harris probably got burned by Eduardo Rodriguez in his potential to opt in. But maybe it wouldn't matter if it's just a 1-year opt in.
Yeah, pulling him that psych like.
But I mean, if you really like Kirby Yates and think he can pitch really well for you next year, sure, what the hell? Give him a second year with an option. It's not that big of a deal.
That's not a bad idea, Brad. You talked about in the chat. You said, "What about Juan Moncada?" The problem is this defense is just it's not great, but that's not actually a bad idea either with the show me contract. In terms of Alex Lang, they haven't really heard anything at all. Like it's been relatively like
his name was on the injury report,
right?
That they released the other day with Young. They mentioned Lang, I think, throwing from 120 feet, something like that. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they'll have him compete for a spot in the bullpen, but we've discussed him at length before. That there's the strikeouts are nice, the wildness is not, and the bullpen seemed to get a lot more comfortable once he was gone. Unfortunately,
what about Freddie? The guy always got Freddie Pacheco too, who again. The mystery behind Freddie Pacheco. That is one of those things that throughout the season, I'm dead serious, Super. There was times where one of the most common questions we got in the minor league report was like, "Oh yeah, he was pitching in Lakeland," and then gone.
I was going to say Freddie Pacheco has been more of a rumor the whole time.
Yeah.
Does he exist? Is he is he the DB Cooper? Yeah.
Well, and the other interesting thing, and we talked about this when it happened, is the Tigers have. It annoys me as a nerd who looks at the transaction logs like every day to see if something has happened, that they re-signed Flores and Leonard, but it was backdated like 8 days. So every day I would look, and it wasn't in there, and it wasn't in there, and then it gets announced. I think Evan broke the news, and you look in there, and it's in the transactions log from November 23rd. Like I checked every day, and so they're like, oh, we'll just squeeze it in there. But all those guys that the Tigers got rid of have been re-signed, with the exception of Brendan White. Haven't heard anything about Brendan White, so I don't know what's going on there. But that was another relief arm that was pretty talented and had some promise. And we've spent most of the last year battling injuries, so I don't know. That may just be a pure injury thing. We might not hear about him for a while.
Do we think Badu's back in the organization?
That one I doubt. I don't know. I would say maybe 50-50. Like he may like it and may view it like he's got a chance to play. But I think that he's got enough ability. I think another team will probably scoop him up.
Could he be Vic Reyes' teammate over in Korea?
Well, that's possible too. But like, I don't know. Like if you're Miami, right? Like you can afford to. They're playing Dane Myers. They're playing other guys. Brian De La Cruz. They got rid of. You can afford to put somebody like Badu out there every day for a couple months and see. He's got the physical ability. It just was never quite got his swing right, and the rest of the game didn't work. But I don't know. I feel like somebody will take a chance on him.
Yeah. I think so too.
At the same time, though, that like I think he's due whatever, like 75% of what he made last year. Maybe that's too rich for somebody, like 1.2 million. I don't know.
By the way, the NFL update Richard provided 6-6 in the fourth quarter. Rams
barn burner.
Yeah, that's a barn burner. Oh boy.
Virgil asked if Manaea is still. He is. Shamania is still out there.
Yeah, he is still out there. I thought he re-signed for the Mets for some strange reason for a moment. I thought he did, but.
Nice pitcher. I mean, there'd be, again, Detroit's kind of hinted they're out of the market for starters, but he's a nice arm.
Yeah, or maybe it's just a smokescreen. Maybe, but yeah. I don't know. The Tigers seem to be the type of team that seems like when they say something, they're gonna, we'll see. But all right, well, it is. I thought maybe staying on air past 10 o'clock would help. Nothing. So it is the winter for now. The winter meetings come to a close without too much fanfare. As heading into next week, we'll see what happens here over the weekend. Maybe there might be an announcement tomorrow morning. Who knows? Scott Boras might be holding court somewhere. He's pretty good with that. He's gonna wear another cool suit and say a lot of nothing, but say a lot because he's a smart man and able to do stuff like that. So, we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know if you guys have any final thoughts or any final predictions here, but you know what? All right, Uber, you give me a prediction here. What do you think is going to happen in the next 48 hours?
Oh, 48 hours. Yikes.
Yeah.
I've been warming to the idea of Bregman. I was a little cool on it a month ago, 2 months ago. I'm starting to get talked into it. And why shouldn't AJ Hinch pull on the heartstrings of bringing the band back together? So come on, let's do it. Alex Bregman.
Yeah, I'm good with Bregman. I think they should sign him just because it makes sense. It fills a need. You can continue to just wait for your prospects forever, but you got the best pitcher in baseball. It would be fun to try to make a run with him while you can. But I don't know. I think they'll sign 2 players before Christmas. It would be nice if one of them was Alex Bregman, but I'm feeling like it's going to be not. It'll probably be a couple relievers.
So, all right, I'll go big here. I'll make a prediction. I'll go. Let's see. I could be just speaking into existence kind of thing as a reporter or whatever, what have you. They sign Alex Bregman. They sign another pitcher.
Ooh. And
then they make a small trade. That's what I think will happen in the next week or so. That just prediction. I could be totally wrong, and I've been wrong before in the past. It's okay, but I think that's what's going to happen. They'll sign another pitcher.
Will this pitcher be opening Detroit's best sushi place at some point in his career?
Well, Novi, by the way, Novi is becoming very. Novi is opening another something. There's another Asian fusion restaurant coming out in Novi, and Novi is becoming a very heavy, popular Japanese, Korean area. So it's so interesting enough. If you live in, I mean, some people, the Novi is a northern suburb, not too far from Chris, off Interstate 96. So
There you go.
I think after Harris catches up on sleep, because I mean, he's got the winter meetings and all that stuff. I think there'll be some sort of movement, but I again, small trade. Alex Bregman, Roki would be nice. Screw it. The Tigers sign Roki. It's just might as well. Look, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's what it was. Thank you, YouTube user. Novi is opening a huge Japanese plaza off Grand River. Yeah. So
boom. There you go.
The Asian culture is.
Can we name it after Roki?
Hey, whatever.
No,
give them a key to the city. City Novi. Look, make it happen. City Detroit. Make it happen.
Somebody sent out they tweeted out the kind of infamous Larry Fitzgerald at the Boston airport meme, which I don't know if you've ever seen. They use it for whenever there's a rumor that somebody's sighting. So we need somebody to go to Metro Airport and
I live right by the airport.
Take a picture of a moderately tall Asian man and just tweet out that, except you can't do it because there's enough credibility there that people would believe it, and it would also ruin your credibility.
Yeah, exactly. Look,
But we need somebody to say Roki Sasaki in Detroit, and that'll be the new Larry Fitzgerald meme.
You know what we need? We need a person who cosplays as a reporter. And there's plenty of those on Twitter that it happens all the time. You have those people who are quote unquote reporters, that sit there and say, my friend who knows somebody who farted in the Toledo locker room told me that this, and this. So a lot of times I love, that's the part that cracks me up is like, I might sound bitter when I say this, but it's just for people like myself and Chris who go to all the games, do all the work. And then there's always like somehow try to build credibility. And I can't even get an email back from some people from the team.
Hey, it's a holiday season.
Whatever.
But
it is
one thing I would remind everybody is that Sasaki won't be signing anywhere until January 15th. So we can
officially
hope for it. Well, yeah, I mean they may, but he's waiting for next year's international bonus period, which is
they could announce an agreement.
Yeah, but it won't officially happen until January 15th. So it also wouldn't shock me if we don't necessarily hear anything until closer to the new year.
PK Morley there mentions Tanner Scott. Love Tanner Scott.
Yeah.
I predicted him back closer to like early November. That would be a great move for Detroit. I mean, that's a real quality arm right there. Haven't heard anything like that.
Yeah, he's going to get a pretty big deal, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be quite Josh Hader sized, but I'm thinking 4 years probably at least, and probably like 20 million a year. So yeah,
4 and 70. I was going to say
something like that. Yeah,
probably too rich for Harris's blood. I don't know.
Yeah, man. That's one area where I don't necessarily think spending money is always the best bet. In relievers, like that's one where I go, okay, yeah, they need a closer, but they'll figure it out. Trade for one, right? Or develop. Every year, there's 20 relievers that come from out of nowhere. I mentioned this earlier today. Like Edwin Uceta, once upon a time in the Tigers system, emerged from the ocean in Tampa last year with like 13 strikeouts to 1 walk per night, like just a dominant bullpen arm. I was like, what? So those guys happen every year. Just find them. It's easier said than done, but I would rather do that than spend $80 million on a closer.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? Jack Anderson might be closing for Boston in 2 years.
Yeah, who knows?
I mean, look. This is the same. Boston, by the way, was the same organization that took Johnny Schreiber, made him a better pitcher. So, again,
go back to the days of Chad Green. Chad Green, a nothing starter in Double-A. Immediately becomes one of the best relievers in baseball for the Yankees. So
there you go.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week. Either same time, or if there's of course the breaking podcast will be out there talking about whatever happens here. So thank you so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. And don't forget there's a PayPal link if you want to start donating. We're going to start getting some things together here by the end of the year. And just safe travels wherever you're going with all the weather. Crazy if you're living in the state of Michigan, and keep it classy. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.